Hello, welcome back to the podcast. My name is Mackenzie Quintana. I am your hostess, aka the Genuine Ginger. That's how you can find me on social media, either one of those names, the Genuine Ginger or Mackenzie Quintana. I also have wow, brain just blanked, a website, thegenuineginger.com. If you'd like to connect more with me, see what else I'm up to besides this podcast, I would love to do that. I would love for you to do that. I would love to connect with you more. If you're new here, this podcast is where I share the things that I've learned or am learning, or kind of experiences that I've gone through or am going through that have just helped me grow in ways that have helped me have a more joy-filled life. And so that is what I'm sharing here, the things that I think could help you have a more joy-filled and more fulfilling life. So on this episode, we're gonna go back, we're gonna continue talking about men. Let's talk about boys, about men specifically. And if you missed last week's episode, we kind of started this topic, and I don't know how many episodes we'll end up having, but most of what I am sharing is from the teachings of Alison Armstrong. She has a couple books out, and I've read several books, and I've read a couple of hers, and it's just really, really great. So if you're wanting more on this topic, I would highly recommend her books. The ones that I've read are called Keys to the Kingdom and Queen's Code, and those are again by Alison Armstrong. So we ended last episode talking about how men are not misbehaving, hairy women, right? They are men, and their brains work differently, and it doesn't make them wrong or make us right or make us better, or neither is better or worse. We're just different, and it's actually really good. And when we can come together and work together as a team, it's incredible. We have opposites that we need from each other, type of thing. You know what I mean? We balance each other out, or there's lots of different ways that you could look at that. So, she talks specifically in the book called The Queen's Code, and I'm not going to go too much into that today, but I think it's important to note that when speaking to men, I think some of the problems that we have when we are, communicating with the men in our lives, or even just, dealing with them or whatever, is there tends to be miscommunication. I feel like that's pretty common, especially in marriages, to be like, it's the communication is sometimes a struggle point. And I think a lot of the reason for that is that men just kind of have a different language than women. Women have a different language than men. And it doesn't make it wrong. It's just different. We, as women, can't expect to communicate with our husbands or with the men in our lives the same way we communicate with our girlfriends, and expect them to respond the same way that our girlfriends do. It's not going to happen. I mean, maybe some guys, there probably are some that are a little bit more used to that than others, and they're able to respond the ways that we want them to and stuff than others. I'm not saying that's impossible, but it's very different. And I've had thoughts, just in pondering about this myself, and I think she also mentions this at some point, Alison Armstrong, that we as women could say, well, that's not, why should I have to change the way that I talk in order to communicate with a man? Like, that's, that you could see that as maybe like unfair or whatever. And the example that she gives is like, well, you wouldn't go to a foreign country where they speak a different language and, try to speak to someone in English or whatever your native language is, and think that it's dumb or inconvenient or, not fair that they can't respond to you if they don't know the language that you're speaking, or that they, that you can't communicate with them because you don't know their language. Like, it's just a fact of the matter, right? Like, if someone is speaking Spanish and you don't know Spanish and they don't know English, like, there's going to be some confusion, right? And so, like, the same thing is true for men. Like, they literally just kind of speak a different language. And so it's not that we just have to kind of learn. We don't have to, right? Like, you don't have to, but if you want to have a good relationship with the men in your life, it's probably helpful to be able to learn how best to communicate to them. And one of the, like, I think the main key points is to just be very direct and precise with a man. Like, for the most part, if you're saying something, as women, and I am especially this way, like, I want to share all of the details of the story. And like, like, I might have a question, but I'm gonna share all of the story before, of like, all of the background information and everything about the question before I actually ask the question. And that's like, if I'm talking to my girlfriend, that's great. And she's probably going to really enjoy all of that background information. But if I'm going to talk to my husband, he's just going to be sitting there thinking, like, because men are problem solvers. And so they are just looking for a problem to solve. And so if you're just giving them all of this information, this story, they're just going like, okay, what is it? Like, what am I trying to do here? Like, what is the point to what if she's trying to tell me, what am I supposed to be doing right now? And a lot of times I feel like they get frustrated because they don't know. And so they end up just kind of tuning us out, and then we get offended or whatever, right? And so a lot of times it's important to just be direct. If maybe you do have a story that you want to tell them, and it's just purely for you just purely just want to tell them a story just for the sake of you sharing a story with them. So tell them that. Just be like, hey, I want to tell you something. Will you just sit here and listen? And like, that way they know, like, oh, okay, she's not expecting, me to like give an opinion afterwards, or she's not expecting me to solve an issue here. She just wants me to listen. And so then they're more able to do what it is that you need of them. Or maybe you do have, we want some advice. And so you could say, hey, I would like your advice on this. I'm going to tell you something first, and then I would love to hear your opinion on it, or your advice or whatever. And again, that they're trying to solve a problem. And so that gives their brain like, oh, okay, she wants my opinion on this. So I'm going to listen with the intent of then being able to give my opinion. But if we just like start talking, and then at the end we're like, so what do you think? They're like, like we just gave them so much information that they didn't know what to do with until the very end. And so they're like, I don't, that, and again, it's this, I hope that I've made it very clear. I'm not saying this like to like trying to show you that men are dumb because they can't handle all the details or whatever. They can. They just need to know what we expect them to do with the details, to do with the information that they're giving them. And again, it's actually like they're like really good at doing whatever it is that we ask once we tell them. But so often we miss that key of like explaining to them what it is that we're wanting from them. And so they don't know, like they just don't know that, right? They can't read our minds, which is a whole other thing. Like she talks about, if you have expectations for what you want for your birthday or an anniversary or whatever, like, which I feel like I'm so grateful. I feel like this is becoming more and more normalized. Like, just tell them. Like, even if you want it to be a surprise, be like, hey, I would love it if you planned a really thought-felt surprise for my birthday. Like, even though that may, like just letting them know your expectations, because they can't read our minds. And to their defense, so often we tell them one thing when we actually mean another. And so like, I don't blame them for just being like, you know what, I give up, because even when you do tell me what you want, you actually don't mean what you say, right? So like, I feel like a lot of the confusion that happens is actually brought on by us as women, because we aren't clear. A lot of times we as women don't actually even know what we want, and we just expect them to figure it out, even though we actually don't really know. So like, how can we expect them to figure it out if we don't know, right? So just tell them what we want. I know that kind of, we don't see that in the movies, and so it's not as romantic, and we have all of these really high expectations based on the movies that we all watched as little girls, but that's movies. And I'm sure there are, there is the guy, there are the rare men out there who do just are so in tune with the women in their lives or whatever, and they do have the capacity and the ability to do all of these really remarkable things. But for the most part, I think most men just kind of want to be told what to do and what is expected of them. And most of the time they're very happy to be told, and to, like, I mean, not in a, obviously not a bossy way of like, I expect you to do this and this and this and that, but just being like, hey, for my birthday, there's this purse that I've really had my eye on. Here's the link. I would love it if you got that for me. Or, here's my Amazon wish list. I would love it if you picked something from there. Or, whatever. Like, just being more clear and direct so that we're setting them up for success. And then we're like, neither of us are then feeling like idiots when the birthday comes around and we don't get what we want, right? Another thing that I feel like is very different, which I kind of touched on this, like a lot of time as women, we say something, but we actually mean something different, right? But men, most of the time, what they say is what they mean. So, and I've found myself catching myself a lot with this lately with my own husband, because like he'll say something and then I'm trying to like figure out like the underlying meaning of what he's saying, because if I had said the thing that he had just said, like there would be an underlying meaning to it, like it would be me like trying to beat around the bush to like hint to something. But men don't do that. Men don't hint to things. They don't beat around the bush to like, I forgot the word in English, but like say something, non-direct, is that, yeah, anyways, I can't think of the word in English. I'm bilingual in case you didn't know that. But normally lately that's not a problem because I speak most of the time in English now. But anyways, I forgot what I was saying. Oh yeah. So like if a man says like, hey, I want to go do this, he means, hey, I want to go do this. He doesn't mean like anything besides that, whereas women, it's like, hey, I want to go do this. And a lot of times we want them to then be like, oh yeah, let's go, I don't know. I can't think of a really good example right now, but you know what I mean? So like, or like if a man offers to do something for you, a lot of times as women, we offer to do things for other people when we don't actually really want to do them, but we offer it because we think that we should, or we think that it's a courteous thing to do or whatever, but like actually we really don't want to do it. Men aren't that way. If a man offers to do something, it's because he's willing and he wants to do what, maybe not necessarily that he wants to, but he's willing to do it, right? So we can take men for face value, like for what they say, and that's not the case most of the time for women. And so there's a little bit of miscommunication, I feel like, that happens there. Let me think what else. I'm looking over my notes that I've written. This is kind of off topic from what we've been talking about, but also very, very important to point out. Men have a stronger sense of who they are than women. Women, we are really good at adapting, and we've been this way for generations, for centuries, because we kind of had to. So like we're so good at adapting, so much so that we can adapt to what we think our husbands or our family or our community thinks that what we think they need us to be. And then we end up losing ourselves. And I feel like I've talked about that as well in other episodes. And so it's important, Alison Armstrong talks about this in the Keys to the Kingdom book. It's important for women to have something that they're passionate about that doesn't have anything to do with their family or their husbands or their community, like just something, or it could have to do with those things, but something that they just kind of do for themselves. And that is so that they can have a sense of, just a stronger sense of who they are. And so that they aren't getting so lost in other people's expectations. I feel like I've recently done a podcast on that, about like not losing your sense of self, not losing who you are. I don't remember what it was titled now though, but you could go back and listen. Maybe it was the one about not putting yourself in a box. I don't remember. I'll probably talk about it again in the future because it's a very, it's a very important topic, but just keep that in mind, that it's important more so than men. Women need a passion. They need something that they're passionate about that has nothing to do with anyone else, that's just for them. And I think that's a reason that we are seeing a lot of female entrepreneurs coming up now, right? A lot of like the social selling and the MLMs, like most of the time it's women, and it's because they are excited to finally have something that can just be for them, a business that is just their business and it doesn't have anything to do with anyone else, right? That's definitely part of the reason that I started my business, my makeup business that I did 4 years ago, and why I've continued now to kind of pivot to the skincare business is because it's like, even though there's been periods of time where it hasn't necessarily been very lucrative for us, for me or my family, it's still something that I can do that's just for me. That's just to fulfill, what I want to do. And men need that as well, but I think it's more important for women to have. Let's see. We might finish up there. I think we will finish up there for today. And I'm just going to give a little update. Well, actually, I don't really have. If you're following along this podcast and listening to every episode, you know that we're kind of going through some lifestyle, some family changes. We're getting ready to move, hopefully. And so I'm just going to say that if like in the next several months, if I maybe just disappear, that's why. It's because we're moving and it's just, things are crazy and I haven't been able to carve out the time to get these podcasts recorded. So I hope you won't take that personally. Just know that we all have lives, right? And we all have periods in our lives, times in our lives where things get super crazy, and we have to prioritize things. And of course, I love this podcast and I love sharing things with you. And also, sometimes there's going to be other things that I need to prioritize. So just putting that out there, that may happen in the future where a couple weeks get skipped or whatever, that we don't have episodes released. But hopefully not. I'm planning on things just going very smoothly and having it all work out great. And so, yeah. Okay. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next week. I will see you then. Bye.